Hello and welcome to the Sun Today for the 29th of April, 2011. I'm Alex Young, NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, sitting in for Dr. Keith Strong. Today will be my last day, and tomorrow Dr. Strong will be returning. The current solar activity level still remains relatively low. However, we have seen recently a C4 flare this morning from a new sunspot group that's just rotated onto the visible disk, which I'll show you in a second. Looking at the magnetic field and continuum data, we can see this new sunspot group that is rotated onto the visible disk from the east limb that produced the C4 flare this morning, which is numbered 1203. And before that, a new group emerged over near 1199, which we're numbering 1202. Both 1195 and 1199 still continue to be slightly active, as well as 1203. Moving on to the Solar Dynamics Observatory, we'll first look at the 304 angstrom wavelength, showing us 60,000 Kelvin temperature plasma from the Sun. So looking at the end of this movie where the arrow is, you'll see a bright flash, which is corresponding to the C4 flare. And right about there was the flash for the flare. Now, otherwise, this is relatively uninteresting, but if we move on to the slightly higher temperature, which also corresponds to a slightly higher up in the solar atmosphere, we can see a little bit more activity in the corona. So now we'll look at 171 angstrom. Starting at the bottom arrow, you'll see something moving out from the corona, then slightly faster at the next arrow, and then there's the slight bright flash corresponding to the C4 flare at the last arrow. So we'll start at the bottom. You'll see what we call a dimming as material moves away from the Sun right there, then slightly faster there, and then you see the bright flash at the end. Moving on to slightly higher temperature, and then slightly higher again up in the solar atmosphere, we can see even more. The flare will not be as visible, but the movement in the corona, the material blowing away from the Sun, will be even more visible. So starting with the bottom arrow, you'll see material moving away, which gives us what we call a dimming. Now quickly from the other one, but then the flare is not quite so visible. Both of these events would have probably produced a CME, but unfortunately we don't quite have the coronagraph data up to date from either SOHO or stereo, so you'll probably see these CMEs in tomorrow's data. Moving on to the corona, you can see the entire Sun now with SDO and stereo. You see the very small bright patch that's moved onto the visible disk roughly around 0 latitude, and there are two more bright patches in stereo behind at roughly 30 and minus 30 degrees latitude. Those will still be a couple of days away from rotating onto the visible disk. Looking at auroral activity, still relatively low. The KP index has gone up to 3, and it actually just moved back down to 1. Looking at the coronal hole, still there. We again expect to see the results of this over the weekend as high-speed solar wind coming out of this coronal hole impacts the Earth's magnetosphere. This should probably give us aurora. So again, those of you at high latitudes, keep your eyes out over the weekend for the possibility of aurora. The current conditions, sunspot number is slightly higher at 71. X-ray background stays about the same at B3. The solar radio flux is up to about 110 solar flux units. Solar wind speed is roughly the same at 352 kilometers per second, and the KP index is up slightly between 1 and 3, but still quiet. For the forecast, we still have possibility of a C flare, but we also expect a slightly elevated possibility, though low, of an M flare and very little chance of an X flare. CMEs are still probably going to be around, and the geomagnetic storm level is slightly elevated, But again, this will go up even more over the weekend when we see the high-speed solar wind impacting the magnetosphere. For additional information, check out thesuntoday.org, and also fan us at www.facebook.com/thesuntoday, and check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/thesuntoday. Thank you again, and have a very good weekend.